I've looked at Christianity. Christians suck. The church is nothing more than a money hungry, this and that. I mean, all the
Woo.
stereotypical, or how come all these different leaders are falling, church is this, whatever. Let me ask you something. Let's say
Come
somebody's
on.
saying that today. What would you say to those people that are watching today? What's up, friends? Rob here, and I'm back with a brand new Spitting Fire podcast interview for all of you today. And I'm with my man all the way over there in KC, Mr. Jimmy Arcisz. Will you say what's up to everybody, Mr. Jimmy?
Yeah, what's up, guys? Hey, nice to meet you.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited, man. I know you're going to spit some serious fire today and looking forward to that. But before we dive into that, I do this almost every podcast, and that is reminding you why we do this. And it's because I believe that all of you were created on purpose for a
Come
purpose.
on.
And isn't it about time that you truly
Mm,
start living on purpose? And on top of that, I believe that there's a divine creator that put a leader inside of all of you. And I pray that
yes.
something that we talk about today divinely inspires you to be the leader that I know God has called you to be. So, Jimmy, I'm excited about you being here, man. And I always like to start the podcast off by asking people just to give us a little bit of the backstory, maybe a 30,000 foot view of your story.
Yeah. So I direct an evangelism ministry called Mission House, and man, we're all about unleashing heaven. So as a matter of fact, when I met Rob, I was in a VIP party with a bunch of insurance agents and started talking. Said, "Man, what agency do you work for? Who do you work for?" And I said, "Man, I don't sell insurance. What do you do?" "I unleash heaven." And so that's what I do. We share the gospel and with word and action. So that's what we're into right now here in Kansas City and really around the world. We have partners in Zambia, Africa, in Bohol, Philippines, in Cusco, Peru, and we have people that we've raised up that are unleashing heaven in their neighborhoods right there, all around the world. So, dude, following Jesus has taken me to 5 continents, and I've shared the gospel with thousands of strangers one on one, and then many more, via a platform, whatever. But every single one, man, I'm telling you, following Jesus has been the most radical, most amazing, most fulfilling, most challenging journey I've ever been on. So, my story, I'll tell you quickly how I met Jesus. I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I was an agnostic by the time I started contemplating God and reality. And I don't even think you knew that about me, Rob. You don't know that much about me. Yeah, but I was an agnostic. I developed kind of a hatred for Christians actually. So by the time I got to college, I was writing for the school paper. I was senior writer for the school paper, the Longview Current at Longview Community College. Look it up, Google me. But yeah, so I was writing opinion editorials and editing everyone else's stuff. And I was vehemently, ridiculously anti Christianity, anti anything conservative, anti God, just as far to that side of things as I could be. And all of my opinion editorials were about that. There, I gathered kind of a following, and there were 3 girls who were in my school with me, who I had for multiple classes, and they were like super Christians. You
Mm.
know, they were like, bracelet wearing, WWJD, honk if you love Jesus, Christians, just on fire for God. And I could tell that I became their project. They started talking to me about Jesus all the time. They would ask me questions about things I put in my opinion editorial. And over the course of a semester, man, they really just got under my skin. But it started to be in a good way, and they started to get to me, and the truth that I was seeing in their life and the things that they were telling me started to get to me. Well, uh, one night I was in my apartment. I live by myself in a little apartment, And I was in my apartment, and I had finished reading this book, and it was about people who'd given their lives for Jesus in the early church. It was an awesome book, true stories of people who had been martyred for their faith in Jesus, died for the cause. And I was a student of history. I loved history. I still do. And something jumped off the page at me. I realized all of a sudden, I realized like these guys had there was no reason for them to die.
Mm.
What dude, what messed me up, Rob, was I'm reading these stories, okay? And these are people, like who who had families. All right. These are guys, dudes that had wives at home, kids, and they're getting drug out of their houses, beaten in public, and killed in sometimes horrific ways. I mean, there were stories in there of Nero putting Christians on torches, putting Christians on poles and covering them in tar and making them into torches for his personal garden. These guys were dying in these horrible ways. But what I knew of Christianity, I knew enough to know that when this was happening, the stories I was reading, there was no reason for them to do it. There was no money in the movement. Everybody was broke, and what the money they had, they were giving to each other, or giving to the poor. Okay, there was no power in the movement. In the eyes of the Romans, they were a resurrection cult.
Mm.
They were being stamped out because they were an intellectual joke. They were a cult. They were not a legal religion. There was no influence in the movement. There was just nothing to gain nothing tangible to gain by dying for it, unless it was true. Unless they had an experience that they couldn't deny. And in that moment, I sat there and I said, okay, Jesus, if you're alive, if you really rose yourself from the dead, if this is real, then I want to encounter you like that. I want to experience you in such a way that I would die for it. It's so real that I'll do anything for it. And so I didn't go to church, so I didn't really know, what to do necessarily, but I kind of had a Jesus seance in my in my apartment, I guess. I just kind of sat there, lit some candles. Jesus, if you're alive. But I sat and I just said, I want to meet you. And God showed up, bro, bro. The presence of God filled my apartment, bro. I get goosies right now when I remember. I'm telling you, I never felt anything like it. The uh, the presence of God filled my apartment. I hit the deck, man. I put my face in the carpet. I was weeping. There was just such
Mm.
a power in the room. And God began to speak to me. And God said, you're banging your head against a brick wall. You're trying to disprove the truth with me. I'm the truth. And he said, listen, you don't have a truth issue. You have a trust issue.
It's good.
And he said, he spoke right to my soul, man. He said, listen, you don't want to give me your life because you don't really believe that you can trust me. And he just said, you can trust me. And so I said, okay, I believe that you're real. I believe that you're alive. I give you my life. You tell me where to go. That's where I'll go. You tell me who I am. That's who I am. You tell me what's true. That's what's true. You lead, I'll follow. And so from that moment on, that's been my life, not perfectly, right? Not perfectly, but all the best moments have been that same me living out that same prayer. Okay, man, tell me where to go. I'll go. Tell me what to do. I'll do it. You know, tell me who I am. I'm that. So uh followed him to Bible college, got a degree in preaching and evangelism, which that and 25 cents, might get you some bubble gum out of a machine in a grocery store. But through that, man, made a lot of awesome relationships, met a lot of cool people, that I've been running with in ministry since then. And just following Jesus, have had the opportunity to raise up miracle hunters. So we use this term miracle hunting that you'll hear me say a lot. So I'll tell you what I mean when I say that. So when I say miracle hunting, here's what I mean. In Colossians 1 and in Acts 17, so they both say the same thing about Jesus. Okay. Colossians 1 says that there's nothing that was made except by him.
Mhm.
Everything is made through him. But it also says that everything is also sustained by him.
Right.
And the word that's used there is an active word. It means that it's continually being refreshed, sustained. It's a continuing thing that's happening. So it's like Jesus is actively, constantly recreating, resurrecting, doing miracles in creation all around us. We're swimming in it. We're living in it. It's all around us. We're sustained by it, by his active word and presence. And in Acts, Paul says the same thing to the Greeks in the Areopagus. He says, by him, in him, we live, we move, we exist. Saying, listen, we're right now surrounded by him. We're right now sustained by him. And so miracle hunting is just simply saying, listen, Jesus is actively doing miraculous stuff right now. It's popping off all around us. We just got to look and listen, be aware, and surrender to it. And God will do incredible things, mind-blowing things. And so that's what kind of our heart's passion is raising up workers to go into the harvest fields and partner with what Jesus is doing. Because Jesus said, listen, the harvest is ripe, guys. It's ripe. But the laborers are few. The people that will go in and actually do the work are few. So pray the Lord of the harvest that he sends workers into labor, into the harvest fields. And so that's our passion, man, is that we're raising up people to see the harvest fields around them, step in and miracle hunt, partner with Jesus, what he's doing. So is that good? What do you think?
Man, yeah, you're dropping a lot of nuggets there. And listen, we're going to unpack for those that maybe not be faith-based that watch this, because I have people that watch it in different arenas. We'll unpack some of the Christianese. Jimmy and I both have our PhD in bilingual translation of Christianese for you. But let me ask you something, because there was something there that I really loved what you said about the Jesus seance in your room. I believe this as a former pastor and church planner and someone who's been doing some form of ministry for over 20 years, that we've really just overcomplicated this Christian thing, right? That God would meet you even in your just imperfect seance and lighting candles, whatever the case may be. Do you agree with that? And if so, will you talk a little bit about just the simplicity that we need to get back to in the universal church?
Oh my goodness, man. Rob, I absolutely believe that. I absolutely believe that. When I met Jesus, I didn't have somebody holding my hand, saying, repeat after me the sinner's prayer or, whatever. When I met him, it was raw. It was real. It was uncontexted by, someone else's interpretation of what was happening. And I'll say this, like the word of God says, that it's by grace, by God's grace, okay, through our faith in him. And faith is believing in something you can't see, you can't touch,
Right.
but you believe, you really passionately believe that it's real. And that's how we're saved, is what I said. That's how we're rescued. That's how we're delivered. That's how we encounter the presence and the power of God. And in that moment, that's what was happening. And I'll tell you this too. I've seen that happen, all over the place. In different countries and different places I've never been. Seen a lot of things I can't explain. And if I can explain away, if I can wrap my mind around everything God does, then is it really God that I'm encountering? Right? Or is it something else that I made up? Right? So yeah, so I'm with you, man. I feel that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I always tell people that if I have more sin than he does saving power, if I have more mess than he does mercy, then that's a really
Come
puny
on.
God,
Come
right?
on.
My story's very
Yeah.
messy. I'm embarrassed to admit that, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
And have failed miserably at different seasons in my life, but he has been so faithful. And I don't know how he does it, but he tends to make something beautiful out of those broken, messy seasons, those seasons that I've screwed up in. And people always used to ask me, well, how does he do that? I don't know. I'm not God. right? And
Yes.
that's one of those things that I believe is a mystery, but it's a good mystery, right? That our finite minds truly can't comprehend this infinite God, this deity. So I love what you
Come
were
on.
saying there. Let me go back to relationships, because I also
Yeah.
believe this world in general, including the church, sometimes we really suck in relationships. And I believe that relationships are the new currency, right?
Come on.
The
Oof.
people that I've won to Christ and the people that I've seen come to Jesus have been mainly through relationships. Not saying
Yes.
there hasn't ever been any street witnessing or other things that haven't seen people come to Christ, but true meaningful relationships and those salvations, if you say that, if you want to use this terminology, that stick, if you will, have
Yes.
really come through just lunches and breakfast and willing to meet people. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we went to the Waffle House and talked people off the ledge from committing suicide, and they wound up,
Wow.
coming to the Lord, or,
Mm.
other things that happen. So talk about this relationship thing, because I think as a culture, we're anemic in that as a whole, and how important is
So good.
relationships just in general.
It's everything. Everything. Um I think if you want proof of how God feels about it, look at Jesus. You know, God could have there's a couple things that blow my mind, okay? One is this, is that God could have come down in a series of messages for us to decipher, right? He could have beep 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 started speaking like the movie Contact in the
Yeah,
90s, if you've ever seen that or something.
yeah,
He could have beamed down, right? Some sort of code for us to decipher, uh, you know, to get to know him or something like that. He could have just huge flash banner in the sky and everybody sees it, knows it, whatever.
yeah,
Um, but he actually came down, became one of us,
yes,
a humble one of us, and we touched him. He smelled, he spoke, he and everything he did was through relationships. And here's something that really gets me, okay? Is that if God knows everything outside of space and time, all right? He knows what's going to happen before it happens. Then why did he choose the era that he chose to come into when he did? Think
mm,
about that for a second. God could have come in the era of social media, right? He
yeah,
could have come and used these airwaves and he could have used that network. He could have used that platform to get the message across. He could have, but he didn't. And the Bible says he came in the fullness of time. So in his perfect timing, he came. He chose that time because he's saying something about the way he does things. And how did he do it? He took 12 guys who followed him with everything, right? He poured into them, and then those 12 changed the world. That's how he did it. That's how he showed us how to do it, you know? And I agree with you. I think sometimes we miss that. And uh we miss the way Jesus did it, the way he multiplied it, the way he rocked it, but yeah, I think it says something about what God's trying to tell us just by when he came and how he did how he did it. If that makes sense. So
yeah. I definitely agree. And listen, if you're watching this today, don't necessarily think that because we're talking about so much Christianity here that there's not some principles that you can take away from the business part of things. And I truly believe that there's a lot of
come
organizations that
on.
are not successful. Maybe they're financially successful,
Mm,
but they're bankrupt in the relationship department. Right. And so I feel like the
good.
most thriving organizations are those that have a culture of healthy relationships, but it starts with the leader's heart. Right. I like to say it this way, that the soil of our hearts will ultimately transition into the soil of our businesses. So
Come
it's
on.
just like a pastor, just like a business owner, our companies, our churches are a reflection of who we are. They take on our identities. So I appreciate you, talking about that a little bit, and expounding on that. Let me ask you something. How did you know though? Like there's somebody watching today and they go, I
Yeah.
kind of feel like
Yeah.
I'm in that same position you're in, Jimmy. Like, I've looked at Christianity. Christians suck. The church is nothing more than a money hungry, this and that. I mean, all the stereotypical,
Woo.
or how come all these different leaders are falling, church is this, whatever. Let me ask you something. Let's say
Come
somebody's
on.
saying that today. What would you say to those people that are watching today?
Wow. I would say, man, I would say I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
I can genuinely say I've been there. I was extremely skeptical.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I would say this: Jesus, Jesus has nothing to do with any of that stuff. And what I mean is that uh, when I met Jesus, I had a lot of uh, stuff I thought about. I thought about God. I thought about Jesus before I met him. When I actually met him, I thought I knew, but I didn't know, you know? And it's kind of like this. It's kind of like think of meeting a person, you know? Um, what if you what if you had heard a bunch of stuff about an individual, good or bad, or whatever, uh, and um, and based on what you had heard about them, from other people who maybe had whatever relational context they had with that individual, um, you judged and decided like whether or not you were going to even meet them, connect with them, or not. Uh, well, if you did that with every single person you ever encountered, you'd have a real short list of friends, and you'd find yourself on a pretty lonely island where you get to just kind of nitpick and judge and decide who you're gonna follow or whatever. So, I mean, I guess what I would say is don't judge Jesus by what you've heard other people say about him. You know, like uh, I personally believe that he's alive. And I've seen some amazing, miraculous things too since then. But I know for me personally, following him has led me into peace and forgiveness, freedom, joy. That is, bulletproof. That doesn't change with my circumstances. So,
No, I definitely love that, and I may say some things here in the next few minutes that little controversial, but I say it in with grace. But it's almost, to me, when people say things like that, it's interesting, because whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, if we're to be honest, we all tend to develop our own version of the Ten Commandments that highlight our
come on.
righteousness and other people's depravity, right? It's not just in the
Yeah.
church. So I always tell people, if we're to be honest, to say that, I understand what you're saying, and there's no excuse for that. Listen, I've been the offender and the offended, so I understand. Okay, but it's interesting that when we're based it off of morality and morality alone, that we open up upon Pandora's box, because the person that's
Come on.
criticizing the church is the one doing XYZ, but they're not doing
Yeah.
this XYZ, right? So
Yeah.
that's where that by faith, by grace comes in. Romans 5:8, that while we were still sinners, and I like to just
Yeah.
elaborate on that, and we were enjoying it and wallowing our sin and didn't give
Come
a
on.
flip about God, he
Come
sends
on.
Jesus to die at the right time for us. This is love in action. He says God demonstrates his love for us. And so I think a lot of people have it
So
twisted that
good.
Christians are just a bunch of imperfect people through their faith,
Yes.
by God's grace, chasing this perfect God, right?
So
And
good. And can I add to that,
please
Raj, real
do.
quick? Because specifically, here's something that I've experienced. Okay, whether I'm in the backwoods of Mufalira, Africa, uh, or right here at the Plaza or Crown Center in downtown Kansas City, um, I've noticed this, that no matter who I'm talking to, whether it's my next door neighbor who I just had an awesome encounter with last week, or it's this guy that I'm planting orange trees with in Mufalira, and these are both two real encounters that I've had. Here's one thing I know that is absolutely certain. Okay, it's never been proven wrong. Is that I have something in common with them. I have something huge in common with them, actually,
Sure.
something deeply intimate in common with them. And it's this: we both have self destructive tendencies.
Sure.
I don't care if you're in Africa or you're in Kansas City. Like, I was able to talk to both these people and be like, look, I'm jacked up. I've done
Okay.
stuff before that I look back and go, bro, why did I do that? It
Mm,
doesn't make sense. It's a self destructive thing that doesn't make sense. The dude in Africa, said the same thing to. And
mm,
yeah, me too. Me too. Okay, well, why is that? Why is that? Because, dude, there's a brokenness that we all have. It's called death. We're very familiar with it. We die. We do bad things. It's it's around. We know it. We experience it, you
mhm.
know? And there's only one who's ever beat death. And that's Jesus. He
Yeah.
rose himself from the dead, and he's still the only one that can beat it. And I've seen beat it, you know? So does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, and kind of staying in that lane, but veering off just a little bit. One of the things that I've
Yeah.
kind of been talking about in our industry or my industry, which is the insurance industry, is I love the conferences. I'm a big self help guy. I am a podcast junkie. I read books, but I've been talking to a lot of faith based agents in our industry that
Come on.
there needs to be a conference that goes deeper than just motivation, that there needs to be true healing. I mean, even at
Yeah.
48, God is still healing me of some things, and
Yes.
things that even happened from all the way in my childhood, and that all the self help and all the self motivation in the world can't heal because there's this
Come
deeper
on.
layer, right? And in this spiritual world that we live in, and Christianity kind of gets thrown in there.
Come
Talk
on.
about that for a minute. What do you think that healing is for most people? Like what is, my friend calls it a God-sized hole, that God-sized hole or God-shaped hole that's in everybody. We talk a little bit about this versus coping that our
Yeah.
culture really creates. Let's just cope with everything versus healing.
Yeah. Oh man. Okay. Well, so I'm going to start off with a little bit of science.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So in the third law of thermodynamics, this is actually this what I'm about to tell you is what brought a friend of mine who is an engineer for Honeywell, high level engineer, brilliant, brilliant guy. This dude was tutoring Calc 3 when he was a freshman
Wow.
in college. And he's genius, genius. And this is what introduced him to Jesus. He was learning, he was diving into the laws of thermodynamics, and he could not shake the mystery of entropy.
Mhm.
Okay, so entropy is this thing that's there where a certain amount of energy is just lost whenever there's a transference, a reaction and stuff that can't be accounted for. It's on a molecular level a picture of death, that
Mm.
everything is moving. What it says is everything is moving from a state of order to disorder at a degree that is random. It doesn't make sense. The greatest scientist in the world can't put a finger on it, can't nail it down, can't fathom it. Okay. It's there. We experience it all the time. And what I said earlier about Colossians, okay, but what we find is that the world that we're living in, the universe that we exist in, it hasn't completely dissipated or died out. Why is that? It's because there's another force that you can see pushing and pulling electrons and atoms and moving things in an orchestrated dance in a way that is actively resurrecting. It's actively bringing new life into what entropy is causing disorder in. It's amazing. It's beautiful, this system. Okay. But we find that same exact thing happening within our souls. And what we do a lot of times is that we try to pick, it's like imagine a tree that has bad fruit, okay? And you're picking off bad fruit, you're picking off bad fruit, but the bad fruit keeps coming, the bad fruit keeps coming, and you don't understand why until you take another look at the tree, you look down at the roots, and the roots are rotting and dead, and there's no life coming up into the tree. The tree's not getting resurrected. It's just dying from the inside out. And you're just picking off bad fruit and hoping that good fruit will come back. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But Jesus is the, what I tell people a lot of times, the avatar, the voice of resurrection. He's the power of resurrection. He's the voice of resurrection. And when I say things like, man, give Jesus your life, he'll give you new life. What I mean is that no, he has the power and the authority to give you new life, supernatural life. And you're not going to get that from any amount of medicine or whatever. Now, I'm not saying medicine doesn't have its place, you know, absolutely. But can I tell you a quick story, a true story of something
Yeah.
happened? Okay, so
But
when I was a youth pastor, and uh, we went on a retreat one year, and this young lady who was new, she just showed up. I think she was like 17. Her name was Paige. She shows up, and her mom introduces her and says, "Hey, if it's possible, I'd really love for Paige to kind of stick close to you, because she has some things she's working through." I'm like, "Okay, all right, sure." And she gave me this bag. And she's got a lot of meds that she needs to take, or else, things could get bad. And I said, "Okay, all right, I'll. We have a nurse that came on the trip with us. I'll give the meds to the nurse, but I'll keep a close eye on her." So Paige just kind of buddies up with me. Sweetest little girl, so sweet. She buddies up with me most of the trip. At the campfire, the second night, she decided she was going to give her life to Jesus, and in tears, she just had this moment with God. Okay, when we came back, I watched as joy began to just bubble up in her. She began to make friends. Then the next 2 days, she began to make friends. It was awesome. We came back. She jumps off the bus, and she's no longer sitting with me. She's sitting in the back with some buddies. And her mom instantly goes, "What did you do to my daughter?" I said, "I didn't do anything, but she met Jesus." And she says, "This is amazing. She's acting different." Paige's story today is even more incredible. She was in and out of psych wards, in and out of mental institutions, harming herself. Um, and today she's completely off of meds. She's not doing psychiatry at all anymore. For years now. She's been growing more and more healthy. But she said it best. She told me, when I asked her, I said, "Man, it's been a few years, since all that stuff." And she said, "Yeah." She said, "When I met Jesus," she said, "it's not as if uh, everything was gone, completely, but I was new, and he's the only one that actually worked. Everything else I did, just it, things came back, or whatever, or it just kind of made it less bad. Jesus is the only one that actually started making me new the more I got to know him. So that's a true story. It's pretty cool."
yeah, no, I definitely love that. I want to talk about, just for a second, kind of piggybacking off of that. I think a lot of times we have this Americanized Christianity that's more about entertaining people than really
Come on.
cultivating and creating atmospheres where people can experience, encounter this God
Yes.
of the Bible. I mean, have you seen that in ministry as well? And I'm not hating on the church. I'm not one of those church haters. So if you're a Christian today watching this, I'm not trying to be a church hater. I've been on both sides. I've been in the leadership, and I've been in the pews or the chairs
Yeah.
or whatever it is you sit in. But I do believe that. I believe that even the most skeptical, most crusty, if you will, person in the world, I believe if they come in and they have this true encounter, similar to what you had in that seance in your apartment there, or whatever bedroom, I believe that God is faithful to meet them in that encounter, right? Do you see that just in
So
the
good.
Christian world as a whole, that we need to have more encounters with God and less entertainment?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Rob. Yeah. I would say this. So whenever I take people on a trip, and we're taking another one to Zambia in May, in the end of May, but whenever I take people on a trip and they encounter this expression of the church in another culture where it's not the westernized, kind of version, I actually have to uh work with them when they come back for weeks to what we call to help reverse culture shock like them, because a lot of times they'll come back and they do have almost like a I don't want anything to do with this version of church because what they've experienced over there was so more visceral, so more real, so more like engaging, encountering, you know, and that's dude, that's part of it too. Like when you experience something, anything, you know, it's it changes the game when it comes to, you know, versus like knowing about it, you know. And I think a lot of sometimes in our uh church today, I think sometimes we can get I've been a pastor too, and sometimes we can get a almost afraid of what almost afraid of what will happen if God does something that blows our minds, you know? We almost get, yeah, afraid of what people will think or what people will say. But what I found is that he knows what he's doing, and man, whatever he does, it's always best.
No, I
It's
totally,
always. Does that make sense?
yeah, no, I totally agree. It's interesting how we're spiritual. We hear all about spirituality and create your own version of that. It's interesting, and myself included. My boys and I, we go watch the Marvel movies and the DC. We love the superheroes, but it's
Yeah,
interesting to me that that's okay in entertainment, sports, music. I mean,
that's good.
we watch some of the weirdest stuff, man, but it's like when we go to church and God does something like, you use my terminology, just wrecks the whole thing, wrecks you, starts wrecking
Woo!
people. All of a sudden, we get freaked out. And I'm going, wait a
Man.
minute, you were just watching like people getting eaten by rabid wolves from from the pits of hell, and or you were just seeing this and that, this supernatural thing. But it's interesting how we don't think it should happen in the church, and I
So
believe that's
good.
even a trick of the enemy, our greatest adversary, that we
Yeah.
don't want it there, but we want it everywhere else. Have you kind of seen that as well?
Yeah, I definitely seen that. Um, I'll tell you, there was one time I took a team back, and they're all on fire. They come back. I mean, yo, bro, you come back from one of these trips and you see God blow it up. Like I'm talking, like we seen literal miracles. Like a woman who'd had a stroke, whole left side of her body is gone. They're saying she's going to die in a few weeks. This happened in Cusco. She got healed, sits up in her bed in her hut, walks out of the hut like legit. It was amazing. You come back, and you see stuff like that, bro. You are on fire, right? You're just a walking bonfire. Just, dude, you're so hyped. And then I remember one team I brought back. It might have been that team. I don't remember, but I brought them back to our church, and I'm working them through like now. Hey, like, look, we gotta, you know, you gotta realize like this different culture now. We gotta figure out how to help people along and, just, whatever. And this one lady, she was like talking to the pastor about something that happened. And pastor was like, man, I'll never forget this, bro. Pastor goes, Pastor goes, man, you know what we could really use right now? We could use somebody to work the coffee machine in the barista in the lobby. I mean, she's coming back from like laying hands on people and seeing God do miracles. And this pastor's trying to yoke that, right, to help make cappuccinos. But we do that sometimes. It's like we get, and I think what happens, this happened to me too, Rob. I'll be honest, I'll be transparent. This happened to me. We get so caught up in what we're trying to do, and a lot of times for God, on this church that we're trying to build, this little kingdom that's going on in our little world, and that it's that like we get so laser focused, especially those of us that are visionaries, we get so laser focused on that and everything needs to happen and make it happen, that everything else that's going on, we just deem it as ancillary,
Yeah,
or it either works with what we're trying to do or it
right.
doesn't, and we just filter it out. And I think that's what happens a lot of times is like well, how can this, what's going on, propel what I'm trying to do? Oh, it can't, then I don't need it. Does that, does that make sense?
Yeah, I like the way Pastor Andy Stanley says it, who's kind of the church planning guru of all gurus. He says that a lot of
Yeah.
times, and listen, I've been guilty of it as well, as a former church planner and pastor, that we marry the model and date the mission when the church really needs
Yeah.
to get back to marrying the mission again and dating the model. And a lot of
Oh,
times we get it twisted in that. And so talk about this for a second, and then we're going to transition to some leadership stuff. But talk
yeah.
about
Yeah.
this vibrant, I've heard you use the word radical faith. I mean, why do so many Christians not have that kind of faith? A, and B, I mean, it's like they're not fully convinced enough to go out and share it. We know the statistics that, the high percentages of Christians never share their faith, let alone go on the street and share with someone else, let alone go and pray for someone else. I mean, God forbid, that's weird, that's radical. But once again, we believe in the weird and radical and everything else, but we don't let it translate over into our faith. How does someone maybe
Yeah.
watching today, maybe for the first time, or maybe they've gotten a little crusty in their faith, how does someone begin to cultivate that vibrant faith in their life?
Oh man, Rob, I love you, bro. I love you. We need to hang out. So I I would say, do the simple answer that I've experienced is that most people haven't encountered it. Most people really haven't encountered it. Most people have just read about it or heard about it, but never really encountered it. And I'm not talking about encountered Jesus. They may have encountered Jesus, but I'm talking about encountered his kingdom coming. You know, Jesus said when he told us how to pray, he said, "Our Father who's in heaven," right? Hallowed be thy name. And then the second part, he says, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth just like it is in heaven." And when he says that in the Greek, this blew my mind when I first learned it. In the Greek, the word there for kingdom come, it means right now. He's not talking about in the future, your kingdom come. He means heaven invade earth right now. So another phrase we use a lot is unleash heaven. Like if we know Jesus, then we should be unleashing heaven wherever we go. We should be available and aware, miracle hunting, unleashing heaven. And a lot of people just haven't experienced it. What one of the things we do with Mission House is we don't want to be another conference multiplier, meaning like we just had the Send here in Kansas City, and I'm not knocking the Send. It has a praise God. Like I housed 6 people from all over the country because we had this big lake house at my house for the Send. But I didn't go, but that was just because family stuff. But it was like 60,000 people at Arrowhead Stadium talking about, yeah, it was awesome. Talking about evangelism and stuff. Okay. And that's great. But really, our call in Mission House is to intimately, relationally help people experience the kingdom of God coming to earth. So, like, here's what I mean. We'll go do outreaches. We just did one recently with Polaris, actually. We did an outreach to an extended stay hotel where there's a lot of sex trafficking and addiction, and the kids are the victims. So we gave diapers and formula and met needs of these children. It was beautiful. But we also, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Like we also prayed for people and expected God to do powerful things. So there's one moment, and you can see this on our website. The woman like tells the story of it, but there's one moment where like literally felt like I was this one woman God was going to do something special with. So what did I do? I grabbed somebody who I knew had never experienced this kind of thing before on their fence with their faith. Said, "Hey, why don't you come along? Why don't you come over here, bro? Why? What's going on? Just man, just it's cool. Just watch what's about to happen." Okay. So we came over. I started talking to this young lady. I said, "Hey, listen, I feel like you have nightmares. Do you have nightmares every night?" I'm not talking about like every once in a while. I mean specifically like it's debilitating. Every night you have nightmares. You can't sleep every single night, and they're nightmares of rape. That's a very specific thing. I don't encourage everyone to go out and do weird stuff like that. I don't do weird stuff like that all the time, but this is what God was doing. She starts bawling. Her husband's sitting next to her. Her husband looks at her, starts bawling. How did you know that? I didn't know that. Jesus is alive. he told me to do this, and he wants to set you free from those nightmares. We right there shared the gospel with her. She gave her life to Jesus. The next day, came back, she was nightmare free. Okay. Now, that person that was with me, he is actually the one who volunteered to go back and meet up with her. He would have never done that before, but he did it. He called me and said, "Hey, can I go right now and go check on her and pray with her?" I mean, so when you encounter it, it changes the game. And Jesus was the master at that, by the way. Jesus was all about that. Jesus told, what did he tell Peter? He says, "Hey man, like put down your nets, come with me, and you'll be fishers of men." He was constantly taking people with him, taking them alongside, and to the point where he finally tells him, he said, "Listen, I'm going to go away, but don't worry about it, because all the things you saw me do, you're going to do. And even greater works than these, even greater, even cooler things you're going to do." But he was very experiential, bringing people along, watch this, experience this. And that's the relational component, by the way. I'm rambling, but that's the relational component that we want to be Mission House. We passionately are pursuing being the relational component. Like, instead of just doing another big conference, bro, let's go, come with me, let me help you. Or you got a neighbor you're
Sure.
trying to witness to? Okay, cool. Let me sit down and let me help
Okay.
you process that. Does that make sense? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it does. And if you're watching today, once again, let me break this down for you. In our industry, or in the sales industry, or just in general, we talk about people getting out of their comfort zone. That's really what we're talking about here is, and I truly believe this, that your spiritual breakthrough is on the other side of how undignified some of you are willing to be. Right? Think about it this way: we serve a
Good.
God who was willing to be undignified, to go on the cross, to be embarrassed, to be shamed, to be mocked, to be spit on, to be made fun of. Right? That's undignified, but he was willing to do it for you and I, to come into that relationship, to have that experience. And some of you watching today, that vibrant faith is on the other side, I believe, of you willing to
Woo!
be undignified. So I definitely appreciate you sharing that.
Yes.
So let's transition to some leadership stuff, if you will.
Cool.
What is one core value that Jimmy lives by? What's one that rises at the top that you go, this is a staple in my life, it's non-negotiable?
Man, I was just that's funny that you say that, because I was I was just talking to Amy's team in Polaris about this the other day. For me, it's the compounding interest of faith.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, like, I have certain things. I get up and I worship the Lord. I pray. I meet with Jesus every day. Okay. When I went to Bible college, I was sitting in a class, spiritual formation class, and the teacher asked, like, you know, how many of you guys raise your hand if you pray 15 minutes a day? I think he started with an hour, something outrageous, quote unquote outrageous. But he said, "How many pray an hour a day?" Nobody raised their hands.
Sure.
How many pray half an hour a day? Nobody raised their hands. How many pray 15 minutes a day? And I was surprised. Only a few people raised their hands. And one of those guys goes, "Does, like, in the car on the way to work count?" You know? And these were guys that were there, and women that were there to be missionaries, pastors. This is ministry school. This is seminary, you know? And these people don't pray. They don't pray. And so I purposed in my heart. And I was a baby Christian, by the way. I went off to seminary like right when I got saved, like a couple months after I got saved. It was crazy. Um, but I just remember I purposed in my heart. I said that no matter what else happens to me in my life, that will not be me. Like, I'm going to establish an intentional bedrock of prayer in my life. And so I did. So uh, for me, the compounding interest of that, of that faithfulness in relationship with God, has honestly made all the difference throughout my life. Um, just just uh, the fruit of that really has been probably, it's the thing that propels me to go out on a limb and take a risk. It's the thing that stokes my trust in Jesus, so I know he's not going to leave me hanging out to dry. You know, um, it's the place where I hear his voice and I change direction. It's the place of vision for me. You know, it's the place of forgiveness for me, for renewal, refreshing. It's everything. So yeah,
So let's be practical for a minute, because like I said, I have
yeah,
people that are Christians and non-Christians that watch this.
yeah,
Prayer seems kind of that hokey, kooky, very woo pray, but really it's nothing more. If I could put it in a non-Christianese way, is it's really nothing more than just communication with this living God, right? So give us one
yeah.
practical tip. What if somebody says, I'm a Christian and I'm watching this today and my prayer life sucks? What is one habit or one action step that I can start praying or start put into practice that would help me start praying at least more frequently? Maybe not start the hour right away, but how can I start with 1 minute and then graduate up from there?
I love that. That's good. Two things, if I can. I'd say one. I'm gonna steal from. Gosh, I forget his name. Who was the guy from Giftology that was so good at 8% Nation? Do you remember his name?
Oh man, if he wouldn't have asked me,
Oh,
yeah, I'm ruined
yeah.
something ruined. No,
Eh, no,
I
I
can't think of
can't.
his name, but yeah, yeah,
But yeah, he's the guy from Giftology, runs Giftology, started Giftology, and I love what he said about the power of ROR versus ROI, right? Return on relationship. And he at one point mentioned that one thing that he had done to build a relationship with this individual that happened years ago in his life, when he looked back over the course of his career, he said that uh sorry, there we go. He said that that one thing that started that relationship now amounted to, like, what was it, like millions of dollars.
yeah,
It was insane the amount of money that it amounted to. And the prayer is like that. Okay, so it's the compounding interest of return on relationship. In your business, there is a powerful compounding interest when you pour into a relationship, when you actually do it and you care and you do it. And it's the same with our relationship with God, with my relationship with Jesus. uh I can now, like, I have this atheist aunt and she always is questioning me on Facebook and stuff, but I love it and she
right.
loves me. And now she loves me to the point where she'll go to war for me when other people will attack me on social media. She'll come out of nowhere on Instagram and be like cussing people out. I'll have to pull her back. And she's an atheist, but there's compounding interest that I have with her of relationship
Yeah, it's
because I
good.
poured into her life. And then also, she's seen the compounding interest of my relationship with Jesus. She's seen the faithfulness. She's seen me be the same dude. She's seen that consistency, and she knows that it comes from me not being religious. It comes from my relationship with the Lord. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And once again, I mean, I think it boils down to we've taught people how to do a lot of activity, but that our activity for God should be birthed out of our adoration for him, right? Or
Come on.
I heard one
Yeah.
pastor, Peter Scazzaro, put it this way, that many times we tend to sacrifice being with God on the altar of doing for God.
Come
And I've
on.
been guilty of that time. So I'm not being a hypocrite when I say, I'm not preaching at someone. I'm sitting there going, hey, I'm preaching to myself. And I have found that the more that I've learned how just to be a son, or maybe for some of you watching, a daughter, that
Yeah.
that prayer becomes easier when it's not so much doing, but it's
Come
birth out
on.
of this just being, knowing who I am, but more importantly,
Yeah.
whose I am. So I definitely love that leadership principle. As we get ready to
Yeah.
wrap up today, and man, this time has went
Yeah.
by, and you brought some serious fire today, my friend. And one leadership principle that you've learned in your own life, you've cultivated, and that you lead others from. Is there one that rises at the top that you go, man, this is something that I really live by?
Yeah. So I would say, for me, it's a friend of mine said one time, he said, there's no such thing as mistakes, really. he said, we don't make mistakes. I said something about, oh, that was a mistake. He said, no, 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 we don't make mistakes, but we do have successful misadventures, but for me, I would say it's been always taking the risk uh, of following Jesus versus
Mhm.
doing nothing,
Yeah.
but even even more specific, I guess, than that would be risking in love. When you're risking everything in love, when you're risking everything out of your relationship with the
Mhm.
Lord, when you're risking it in love, good things have always happened in my life, and I've been in a lot of crossroads. I remember one time, a big one for me was I had a pastor friend of mine, and this will probably apply to some of you guys in the insurance game. But I had a pastor friend of mine when I was going non-denominational, when I was going to the mission house for like to do full time. Uh, and I was going to go non-denominational, and the Lord was just speaking to me to do it, like for to never go back to denomination. And not that I hate, I don't want to get into anyways, but it doesn't matter. But for me, it was like, no, like you're not
Yeah.
going back to this, to what was comfortable. It was the big system, the big,
Sure.
yeah, the big network and all that stuff that was comfortable is built on parameters, is built on rules, is built on, a system. Um, I remember this guy, he sat down with me and he said, man, I love you. And he said, but you're making a terrible decision to go non-denom. He said, you're going to have no friends.
Mm.
You're going to have no money. You- you're going to be all alone. You're going to have no accountability.
Right.
And what's crazy is that, gosh, that was 10 years ago. Um, and the exact opposite has happened in my life. When I made the decision to just radically follow him in my career and go the path not taken, the road not traveled, um, I have more friends. I'm hanging with you today, Rob, big time. Okay. But I have more friends.
Sure.
God's put me in more places. I've met more people. He's taking care of my needs. I'm talking to you right now. See the background? This is this is the premier private lake in Kansas City, Lake Lotawana. There are $2 million houses in this picture, right behind me. Okay, and I have a 5 bedroom house on the water, 3.5 bath with a pontoon boat. How? God did it. I don't belong out here.
Yeah.
I'm just an evangelist.
Yeah.
There are people out here, but man, at every turn when I've trusted him, when I followed him, you know, um, so I guess just man, risk it in love.
Yeah, I love that. And isn't it interesting how we get trust amnesia with God, right? Because
Woo.
taking risk really is not a risk when it comes to God, because God has a
Come on.
perfect resume in the department of being faithful.
Yes.
And that he calls us to the countercultural, right? We know even Paul writes in the New Testament, it's the foolish things that confound the wise. Like, how many times have we go, God, are you sure? Like, do we need to run this
Yes.
back through the angel department? And, can
Yeah.
we run this by Moses or, someone kind of, do a little quality check here? But that's really, it's interesting how we forget that yes, it is stepping out, it is taking risk, but really it's not that much of a risk when it's this divine being who's never missed a beat when it's come to being faithful.
Come
And
on.
so I definitely love what you're saying. That I ask everybody that comes this that comes on the podcast, and that is, if there was one word to use to describe Jimmy, what would that one word be?
Ooh, one word. Oh
Mm-hmm.
man. Man, that's good. Gosh.
And it could be multiple words if you can't think of one, but just something that rises to the top, right out of your gut.
Unleashed, man. Especially right now in my
Yeah.
life. The Lord has set me free from so much, bro. that I'm just becoming more and more unleashed, man, untethered to the world, untethered to the way I've been told it has to be done, untethered to, my own limitations. That's something for me, like the Lord is untethering me from my own limitations, untethered to my addictions and failures and all that jazz, like just unleashed, unleashed. Yeah.
No, I definitely love that because it really is, by God's grace,
Yeah.
that where you're at, where I'm at, what God is doing, and it really is, disconnecting from what the world says, and the way that it has to be. And I really live by this mantra as well. And I didn't come up with it, but I love the way Ed Milet says it. He says that and well, this is my version of what he said, but we're infecting people with something whether we realize it or not. And I love
Woo!
the fact that you're infecting people with this love, this divine love, this passion, this willing to risk it all in love, this willing to be unleashed. And so I definitely love that. Listen, as we close, let me ask you this first of all: where can we find you online? Are you on TikTok, Instagram, the book? What are we? Where are you at?
The book. Yeah. So, you me throw it in the chat. Will
No, no,
people
no, no.
see
You have
that?
to throw it in
They
the
won't see
chat.
that.
We'll put the links in the
Oh yeah.
description. Just kind of tell us where we're at. Where you at?
Yeah, it's Mission House. Yeah. Mission House Ministries. I know it's long, but missionhouseministries.com has all of the links to we're on Facebook, Insta, TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm constantly updating those with what God is doing. So missionhouseministries.com. You
Yeah.
can go there, check it out. We got everything on there. There's news about our upcoming mission trip and stuff, stuff that's going on. So there you
Yeah.
go.
So as we close today, I just really feel like we need to speak to this. There's somebody watching today. Obviously, a lot of entrepreneurs watch this, a lot of people that are, wanting to chase that dream, that God-sized dream, wanting that to come to fruition in their life. But they don't maybe don't feel they're worth it, or maybe they just don't feel
Come
that
on.
they're enough, or maybe they're
Come
just not
on.
willing to take that risk, that maybe they've just been beat down by this thing called life. We've all been there.
Woo!
As we close today, speak some life over those people that are watching today. What is something you would say to them?
Man, I would say, um, you're born. I'm just gonna repeat what my dude said at the beginning of this. God knew what he was doing when he brought you to this earth for this season. You're born with a purpose, for a purpose, right now, and no one can take that away from you. Man, I was known on my campus as the agnostic. The dude, if you were gonna pick one person out of that campus that would not know Jesus, it was me, and I'm not exaggerating. It was me. I was writing columns about how Jesus wasn't real, and now look at me. It's all I can talk about. It's my life. So, dude, like, it, whatever's happened before doesn't matter. Like, you have a purpose, dude. You're here for a purpose, and your timing on this earth is on purpose. Be unleashed, man. Go, man. Follow Jesus. He'll unleash you. Just be unleashed, untethered, man. Be unleashed. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I've enjoyed, getting to meet you and getting to know you. And of course, there's a lot of other things we could have talked about today, but I appreciate you coming on the podcast and just sharing that infectious passion for God, but just in life, and I really, one of the main themes today was really just taking a risk, not only in our
Come
faith, but in
on.
this life. Be willing to go after those God-sized dreams that He's put
Come on.
in all of our hearts. And if you're watching today, I just want to remind you of that there's a dream inside of you. Quit selling your
Mm.
dream for so cheap. Quit letting people talk
Yes.
you out of that dream. If God put it in your heart, He will bring it to fruition if you will do what Jimmy talked about. That's yielding to His plan, trusting in Him. And some of us right now we're whining and worrying in the waiting, when in
Come
reality God
on.
is working in it. And so I just want to
Yes.
remind you of that. And I pray that what we said today has put fresh wind in your sails. That's the way that I like to put it, that maybe life has knocked that wind out of your sails today. And I pray that something we talked about put fresh wind in your sails. As always, I want to encourage you guys to like, comment, subscribe below, turn on the notifications. That way you're notified every time we drop fresh content like this. God bless you guys. Keep living on purpose, and we'll talk to you soon.